When billionaire CEO Vivian Ashford's heart stopped beating during a board presentation in downtown Philadelphia, 40 executives froze in terror, except for one man. Caleb Mercer, the janitor with a mop cart and CPR training from his paramedic days, fought through security to save her life. His reward? Assault, termination, public humiliation, a viral photo twisting rescue breaths into scandal. But when Vivian finally sees the truth on security footage, watches Caleb take punches while keeping her alive, she makes a vow that will shake her empire to its foundation. This is the story of the invisible man who refused to let anyone die unseen. If you're ready to hear how one moment of courage can expose an empire's darkest secrets, stay until the end. And please, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The fluorescent lights in the Ashford Industries boardroom cast everything in cold corporate white. 47th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Philadelphia's skyline. Mahogany table polished to a mirror shine. 23 executives in tailored suits, tablets glowing, faces arranged in carefully neutral expressions of attention. Vivian Ashford stood at the head of the table, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back severely, her charcoal suit immaculate. At 52, she'd built a pharmaceutical empire through brilliant acquisitions and ruthless efficiency. Her voice carried the kind of authority that came from 3 decades of never being wrong. The Q4 projections show a 17% increase over last year, she said, advancing the slide with a subtle gesture. Our new distribution partnerships in the Midwest have exceeded... She stopped mid-sentence. Her hand went to her chest. Just a flutter. A strange tightness. CFO Gordon Price leaned forward, his perpetually tanned face creasing with concern that looked practiced. Vivian? I'm fine, she said automatically. The words came out slightly breathless. Just need a moment. She wasn't fine. The tightness became pressure. The pressure became pain, white hot, radiating down her left arm. The room tilted sideways. Vivian heard someone gasp, heard her own tablet clatter against the mahogany, heard Gordon's voice from very far away saying her name. Then the floor rushed up to meet her, and everything went black. Yeah. 3 floors down, Caleb Mercer pushed his janitorial cart past the executive elevator bank, his shoulders aching from the double shift he'd pulled. At 34, he looked older, the kind of tired that came from sleeping 4 hours a night and carrying weight that had nothing to do with the cleaning supplies on his cart. His daughter Lily's school picture was taped inside his supply caddy, visible only when he opened it. 8 years old, gap-toothed smile, braids he'd learned to do from YouTube videos. The reason he worked 2 jobs, the reason he kept moving even when his body begged him to stop. Mercer! The facility's supervisor, a thick-necked man named Dale, appeared around the corner. Executive floor. Someone spilled coffee in the main boardroom. They want it cleaned up now. Caleb nodded, already redirecting his cart toward the service elevator. On it. And Mercer? Don't dawdle. Those people don't like seeing the help. The words stung the way they always did, that casual dismissal, the reduction of his existence to something that needed to stay invisible. But Caleb just nodded again, stepped into the service elevator, and pressed 47. The ride-up was smooth and silent. Ashford Industries occupied the top 15 floors of this building, a glass and steel monument to pharmaceutical success. Caleb had been cleaning here for 8 months, ever since he'd lost his EMT certification over a DUI from 5 years ago. A mistake that followed him like a shadow, closing doors before he could even knock. The elevator doors opened onto chaos. Someone call 911. She's not breathing. Do something! Caleb's training kicked in before his brain caught up. He abandoned his cart and moved toward the commotion, his heart rate spiking, muscle memory overriding every instinct that screamed at him to stay invisible. The boardroom was packed with people forming a useless circle around someone on the floor. Executives stood frozen, their expensive suits and careful neutrality shattered by the one thing money couldn't control, sudden death. Caleb pushed through. Move! Everyone move back! Gordon Price's voice cut through the panic. Who the hell are you? EMT, Caleb said, the old title coming automatically, even though it wasn't technically true anymore. He dropped to his knees beside Vivian Ashford. She was flat on her back, lips already showing a faint blue tinge. No rise and fall of her chest, no pulse at her carotid artery when Caleb pressed his fingers against her neck. Cardiac arrest. She needs CPR, Caleb said, already positioning his hands at the center of her chest. Has anyone called 911? Security's handling it, someone said. That wasn't the same thing, but Caleb didn't have time to argue. He started compressions, 30 hard, fast pumps, pushing down 2 inches, letting the chest fully recoil between each one. The training was 5 years old, but carved into his muscle memory. Staying alive, tempo, 100 beats per minute, don't stop. What are you doing? Gordon grabbed Caleb's shoulder. Get away from her. Caleb shrugged him off without breaking rhythm. She's in cardiac arrest. If someone doesn't do CPR, she dies. Security, Gordon shouted. Security! Caleb tilted Vivian's head back, lifted her chin, pinched her nose. 2 rescue breaths, watching for chest rise. Her lips were cool against his. He tasted coffee, her last moment of normalcy before her heart betrayed her. A woman screamed. Oh my God, he's kissing her! Someone stop him! He's assaulting her! The voices built on each other, panic feeding panic, creating a narrative that had nothing to do with what was actually happening. But Caleb had no breath to explain. He went back to compressions, counting under his breath, waiting for the ambulance that should have been here already. Security arrived like a storm. The first guard grabbed Caleb from behind, trying to pull him off. Caleb twisted away, maintaining the compression rhythm. She'll die. I have to. A fist caught him in the ribs. Pain exploded through his side, but he kept going. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, another cycle. Vivian's color was getting worse. Get him off! Gordon's voice, high and panicked. 2 more guards joined in. Someone drove a knee into Caleb's kidney. He gasped, saw stars, but kept his hands locked over Vivian's sternum. Don't stop. Never stop. 4 minutes without oxygen means brain damage. 6 minutes means... They yanked him backward hard enough to slam him against the conference table. His head cracked against the edge. Blood trickled warm down his neck. Through blurred vision, he saw Vivian lying motionless, surrounded by people doing nothing. Please, Caleb choked out. She needs... A guard's boot caught him in the stomach. He doubled over, retching, tasting copper. Restrain him, Gordon ordered, and someone get Ms. Ashford out of here. She needs CPR. Caleb tried to crawl forward. Another kick, this one to his shoulder. He heard something crack. You're killing her! But he couldn't reach her. 2 guards pinned him to the floor, while the others finally, started doing something that looked like compressions, their movements uncertain and too slow. Caleb counted in his head. 30 seconds since his last compression. 45. A minute. Then, impossibly, Vivian coughed. The sound cut through everything, a wet, desperate noise that meant air, movement, life. She coughed again, her body curling reflexively, and someone shouted for the paramedics who'd apparently just arrived. Caleb sagged against the floor, relief flooding through him so intensely he almost missed the pain. She was alive. Whatever else happened, she was alive. Get him out of here, Gordon said coldly. Take him to security. I want every second of this reviewed. They dragged Caleb out through the service entrance, away from the paramedics loading Vivian onto a stretcher, away from the executives who'd watched him get beaten for saving a life. His ribs screamed with every breath. His head throbbed. Blood soaked the collar of his work shirt, but Vivian Ashford was breathing. That had to be enough. The security office smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. Caleb sat in a hard plastic chair, hands zip-tied in front of him, while 3 guards stood around him like he was dangerous. Dale, the facility's supervisor, burst in 40 minutes later, his face purple with rage. What the fuck did you think you were doing? CPR, Caleb said quietly. His ribs hurt too much to speak loudly. She wasn't breathing. She had no pulse. You put your mouth on a company executive. Dale's spit flew with each word. You assaulted her in front of 20 witnesses. That's not... I was doing rescue breaths. It's part of... Shut up. Dale turned to the head of security, a graying man named Patterson. Tell me you got this on camera. Every angle, Patterson confirmed. We're reviewing it now. Good. Dale jabbed a finger at Caleb. You're done here. Fired, effective immediately. And if Ms. Ashford or the company decides to press charges, you're going to jail. Caleb's stomach dropped. I saved her life. You stuck your tongue down her throat while she was unconscious, Dale was screaming now. What kind of sick? That's not what happened. Caleb's voice came out steadier than he felt. Check the footage. You'll see. I did everything right. She's alive because... Get him out of my building, Dale said. Now. They cut the zip ties and escorted Caleb to the service exit. Someone tossed his phone and wallet after him. The door slammed shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Caleb stood in the alley behind Ashford Industries, blood crusting in his hair, ribs screaming, shoulder possibly dislocated, and tried to remember how to breathe. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Hattie Lane, his 70-year-old neighbor who watched Lily after school. Everything okay? You're usually home by now. Caleb's hands shook as he typed back. On my way. Had some trouble at work. He didn't know how to explain that trouble meant he'd just lost the better of his 2 jobs for the crime of keeping someone alive. The walk home took 40 minutes because Caleb couldn't afford the bus fare. Each step sent pain radiating through his ribs. His head pounded in rhythm with his heartbeat. People on the sidewalk gave him a wide berth, a black man with blood on his shirt, moving like something broken. Invisible, until he looked dangerous. Then suddenly very visible. His apartment building was a 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that real estate agents politely called transitional. Cracked sidewalks, graffiti on the bus shelter, the bodega on the corner with bars on the windows. Caleb had lived here for 2 years because the rent was $600 a month and the landlord didn't do credit checks. Mrs. Hattie's door opened before he reached his own. She took one look at him and gasped. Sweet mercy, child, what happened? I'm okay, Caleb lied. Is Lily... Watching cartoons in your place. Gave her dinner already. Mac and cheese. Hope that's all right. Mrs. Hattie grabbed his arm, gentle around what looked like emerging bruises. You need a hospital. Can't afford it. Caleb tried for a smile. Thanks for watching her, Mrs. H. I'll get you back this week's sitting money. Boy, hush. You know I don't watch that baby for money. She studied his face with eyes that had seen too much life to be fooled by anyone's brave face. You in trouble? I don't know yet, Caleb admitted. Maybe, Lily's voice called from inside his apartment. Dad? Be right there, baby girl, Caleb called back, then lowered his voice. Don't tell her what I look like, okay? I'll clean up first. Mrs. Hattie squeezed his hand. You're a good father, Caleb Mercer. Whatever happened, you remember that. Inside his apartment, 400 square feet of peeling linoleum and hand-me-down furniture, Caleb locked himself in the bathroom and assessed the damage. His reflection looked like something from a crime scene. Blood matted his hair. A bruise was already spreading across his cheekbone. His work shirt was torn and stained. He stripped carefully, gasping when the movement pulled at his ribs. Definitely cracked, maybe broken. His shoulder throbbed, but moved when he tested it, dislocated and popped back in during the struggle, probably. The shower ran cold because the water heater was broken again, but Caleb gritted his teeth and washed away the blood. Watched it swirl pink down the drain and tried not to think about what happened next. No job meant no rent money. No rent money meant eviction. Eviction meant... He couldn't let himself finish that thought. When he emerged in clean clothes, sweatpants and a hoodie that hid the bruises, Lily was sitting on their second-hand couch, her homework spread across the coffee table. She looked up and smiled, and Caleb's heart clenched with love so fierce it hurt worse than his ribs. You're late, she said, but her tone was gentle. At 8, she already knew not to push too hard about things that made her dad look sad. I know, baby. I'm sorry. Caleb sat down carefully, trying not to wince. How was school? Good. We're learning about the water cycle. She showed him a diagram she'd drawn. Clouds, rain, rivers, ocean, repeat. Mrs. Patterson says I'm really good at science. That's because you're brilliant. Caleb pulled her close, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. The most brilliant kid I know. Dad? Lily looked up at him. Are you sick? You sound funny. Just tired, baby girl. Long day. He kissed the top of her head. You finish your homework. I need to make some calls, okay? What he actually needed was to figure out how to survive what was coming. The next morning, Caleb's phone exploded. The first notification was an email from Ashford Industries HR. Your employment has been terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct and violation of company policy. Final paycheck will be mailed within 72 hours. The second was a text from his other job, night shift warehouse work. Saw the news. Can't have you here. Sorry, man. Caleb's hands went numb. What news? He opened his browser and immediately wished he hadn't. The headline from Philadelphia Daily Pulse screamed, "Janitor fired after inappropriate contact with CEO." Below it, a photograph. Grainy security camera still. Caleb leaning over Vivian Ashford, his mouth near hers, her body limp beneath him. The angle made it look nothing like CPR. It looked like exactly what those executives had screamed about. Assault. The article was worse. Ashford Industries confirmed yesterday that a janitorial employee was terminated following an incident during a medical emergency involving CEO Vivian Ashford. While details remain unclear, sources indicate the employee made inappropriate physical contact with Ms. Ashford while she was unconscious. The company released a statement emphasizing their commitment to employee safety and zero-tolerance policy for misconduct. The terminated employee has not been charged, but the investigation is ongoing. Caleb's vision blurred. They turned it into this, turned saving a life into something sick and criminal, and they'd leaked just enough information to destroy him without giving him a chance to defend himself. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered out of habit. "Mr. Mercer?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "This is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 6 News. We'd like to get your side of the story regarding the incident at Ashford Industries. Would you be willing to—" Caleb hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. He let it go to voicemail. By noon, there were 43 missed calls, 200 unread texts, and the story had been picked up by 3 more news outlets. Someone had posted his name and address on social media with the caption, "This is the creep who assaulted Vivian Ashford. Make sure everyone knows." Caleb sat on his couch, staring at his phone, and felt the world crushing down on him. A knock on the door made him jump. "Mr. Mercer?" A man's voice, official sounding. "I'm with property management. We need to discuss your lease." Caleb opened the door to find a thin man in a cheap suit holding a clipboard. Behind him, the landlord, a perpetually angry man named Kozlowski, loomed like a threat. "You're 3 days from rent due," Kozlowski said without preamble. "And I'm hearing you lost your jobs. Both of them." "I'll have it," Caleb said. The lie tasted like ash. I need reliable tenants, not child molesters." The words hit like a physical blow. That's not what, I seen the news, saw what you did." Kozlowski's face twisted with disgust. "I want you out. End of the week." "That's illegal," Caleb said desperately. "You can't evict me without—" "Then I'll start eviction proceedings. Either way, you're gone." Kozlowski turned to leave. "And if you don't go quiet, I'll make sure every landlord in Philadelphia knows what you are." The door slammed. Caleb stood there, his daughter's homework still spread across the coffee table, and felt the last solid ground crumble beneath his feet. That afternoon, Lily came home from school crying. Mrs. Hattie brought her to the door, her face creased with worry. Some kids were saying things about that news story. Lily ran past them both, straight to her room, and slammed the door. Caleb followed, knocking gently. "Lily, baby girl, can I come in?" Silence. "Lily, please, talk to me." The door opened a crack. His daughter's face was blotchy and tear-stained. "Madison's mom says you're a bad person. She says you hurt someone." Caleb's heart shattered. He knelt down to her level, ignoring the screaming pain in his ribs. "Baby, I didn't hurt anyone. I helped someone. A woman was very sick, and I helped make her better. But some people don't understand that, and they're saying things that aren't true." "Then why did they fire you?" Lily's voice was so small. "Because—" Caleb searched for words that would make sense to an 8-year-old, came up empty. "Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. But I promise you, I didn't do anything wrong. I saved a woman's life." "Then why is everyone so mad at you?" "I don't know, baby girl. I really don't know." Lily threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. Caleb held her and felt his own tears finally come, silent, hot, endless. He'd done everything right, every compression, every breath, every decision made in those terrible seconds when Vivian Ashford's heart stopped beating. He'd saved her life, and this was his reward. That's it. The week that followed was a masterclass in how quickly a life could collapse. Caleb applied to 17 jobs, got 3 callbacks, lost all 3 when they Googled his name and found the articles. The eviction notice came on Thursday, formal, legal, stamped with the kind of bureaucratic finality that didn't care about context or truth. His bank account dwindled to $47. He sold his TV, his laptop, anything that might bring in cash. It wasn't enough. Lily stopped talking at school. Her teacher called, concerned. Caleb took the call in the parking lot of a grocery store where he'd been hoping to find day labor work and promised he'd handle it and had no idea how. The internet was merciless. The photo had spawned memes. Dozens of strangers who'd never met him, never spoken to him, had decided they knew exactly who he was. Predator, pervert, criminal. Someone spray-painted rapist on his building's front door. Mrs. Hattie scrubbed it off at 3 a.m, but Lily had already seen it. And through it all, Caleb's body was breaking down. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind injuries that didn't heal because he couldn't rest, couldn't afford a doctor, couldn't stop moving long enough to let his body recover. His ribs sent lightning bolts of pain with every breath. His head throbbed constantly. He developed a cough that wouldn't quit, wet and deep and probably pneumonia if he let himself think about it. But he couldn't think about it, couldn't stop, because stopping meant failing Lily, and that was the one thing he absolutely could not do. On Sunday morning, 1 week after saving Vivian Ashford's life, Caleb woke up feeling worse than he'd ever felt in his life. Fever burned through him. The room spun when he tried to sit up. His cough brought up something dark and alarming. He made it to the bathroom barely and threw up until there was nothing left. Lily knocked on the door. Dad? You okay? Fine, baby. His voice was a rasp. Just give me a minute. But when he tried to stand, his legs wouldn't hold him. He slid down the bathroom wall, his vision tunneling, and thought with perfect clarity, this is how I die, alone on a bathroom floor while my daughter waits outside. Then he thought, at least Vivian Ashford lived, and the world went dark. Mrs. Hattie found him 20 minutes later. She'd heard the thud when Caleb hit the floor, heard Lily's frightened voice calling for her dad, and used the emergency key Caleb had given her months ago. The bathroom door wasn't locked. Caleb lay crumpled against the toilet, his skin gray and slick with sweat, his breathing shallow and rapid. Sweet Jesus, Mrs. Hattie breathed. She dropped to her knees beside him, her old joints protesting, and pressed her palm to his forehead. Burning up. Lily, honey, go to my apartment and call 911. Can you do that for me? Is Dad going to die? Lily's voice was tiny, terrified. No, baby, but he needs help right now. Go. Dial 911 and tell them we need an ambulance. Can you remember this address? Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face, and ran. Mrs. Hattie turned back to Caleb, patting his cheek. Come on now, child. Don't you dare give up. That baby needs you. Caleb's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved, forming words without sound. Save your strength, Mrs. Hattie said firmly. She grabbed a towel, ran it under cold water, and pressed it to his forehead. His fever was dangerous, the kind that could cause seizures or worse, and his breathing sounded wrong, rattling in his chest like broken glass. The ambulance took 11 minutes to arrive. By then, Lily had returned and was sitting on the bathroom floor next to her father, holding his limp hand, whispering, "Please don't leave me, Daddy, please." Mrs. Hattie had to physically pull her away when the paramedics came through. They loaded Caleb onto a stretcher with efficient, practiced movements. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, recognized him from the news. Mrs. Hattie saw the flicker of recognition, saw the woman's expression harden. "Wait," Mrs. Hattie said sharply. "I don't care what you heard. This man saved a woman's life. Now you save his." The paramedic's face softened slightly. "We'll do our best, ma'am." They wheeled Caleb out, and Mrs. Hattie followed with Lily clinging to her hand, both of them watching the ambulance doors close on the only father that little girl had ever known. Vivian Ashford woke in her own bed 3 days after her cardiac arrest. surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed and generally made her feel like a science experiment. Her personal physician, a man she paid an obscene amount to be available at all hours, sat beside her, looking relieved. "Welcome back, Ms. Ashford. You gave us quite a scare." "What happened?" Vivian's voice was hoarse, her throat raw. "Sudden cardiac arrest, ventricular fibrillation. If you'd been alone or if help hadn't arrived immediately..." He trailed off, the implication clear. Vivian's memory was fragmented. She remembered the presentation, the pressure in her chest. Then nothing, just a vast, dark void that tried to swallow her whole. And then a voice. Someone calling her back. Hands on her chest. The taste of air forcing its way into her lungs. "Who did CPR?" she asked. The doctor hesitated. "I believe it was a member of your janitorial staff." "But Ms. Ashford, Gordon Price has been handling..." "Gordon." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Where is he?" "He's been managing company communications while you recovered, very protective of your privacy. He asked that we not disturb you with business matters until..." "Get him here, now!" The doctor wisely didn't argue. 20 minutes later, Gordon Price entered her bedroom with his usual practice concern, carrying a tablet and wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Vivian, thank God you're awake. We've all been so worried." "Cut the performance, Gordon." Vivian pushed herself upright, ignoring her doctor's protests. "Tell me what happened after I collapsed." Gordon's smile faltered. "Well, you had a cardiac episode. The medical team responded immediately. You're here now, recovering beautifully, and who did CPR?" A pause. Too long. "One of the cleaning staff intervened. Inappropriately." "Inappropriately." Vivian's voice went cold. "Explain." Gordon set his tablet down and adopted the tone of someone delivering unfortunate news. "A janitor named Caleb Mercer forced his way into the boardroom during your medical crisis. He physically assaulted you while you were unconscious, put his mouth on yours, made contact that was completely inappropriate. Several executives witnessed it and were understandably traumatized. Security had to physically remove him." Vivian stared at him. "He did CPR." "He claimed it was CPR. The optics were very disturbing, Vivian. We have a photograph that's... well, it doesn't look good. We terminated his employment immediately and released a statement protecting both you and the company from..." "You fired the man who saved my life? He assaulted you!" Gordon's voice rose slightly, then he caught himself. "Look, I understand this is upsetting, but we had to think about liability, about your reputation, about what this would look like if it got out that some janitor was allowed to show me the security footage. I don't think that's wise right now. You're still recovering and..." "Gordon?" Vivian's tone could have frozen nitrogen. "Show me the fucking footage, now!" He flinched. In 15 years of working together, she'd never spoken to him like that. "Vivian, I really think... do you want to remain CFO of this company?" The threat hung in the air, crystal clear. Gordon pulled out his tablet with shaking hands and pulled up the security files. "There are multiple angles. The main boardroom camera has the clearest view." He set the tablet on her bed and pressed play. Vivian watched herself collapse. Watched 23 executives freeze like deer in headlights. Watched a black man in janitorial coveralls push through the crowd and drop to his knees beside her without hesitation. She watched him check for a pulse, position his hands, start compressions. Perfect form. Perfect. Perfect rhythm. Exactly what you were supposed to do when someone's heart stopped beating. She watched him give rescue breaths, quick, efficient, nothing remotely sexual about it, and heard someone off camera scream that he was kissing her. She watched Gordon grab the man's shoulder, trying to pull him away. She watched the man continue CPR. And then she watched 3 security guards beat him. They hit him in the ribs. The kidney, slammed his head against the conference table, and through it all he kept trying to reach her, kept trying to continue compressions, kept saying, "She needs CPR, please, she'll die." They dragged him away bleeding. And 30 seconds later, exactly as long as it took for someone else to start inadequate compressions, Vivian watched herself cough back to life. The video ended. Vivian looked up at Gordon. Her voice was very, very quiet. "You watched this footage and decided that man assaulted me?" "The optics. He saved my life while getting beaten. And you fired him. We had to protect the company. If this got out, if people thought we were allowing staff to... Get out! Gordon blinked. I'm sorry? Get out of my house. Get out of my sight. And start praying I don't have security throw you out the same way yours threw out the man who kept me alive. Vivian, you're not thinking clearly. You've been through trauma. Once you've had time to process... Out! The word came out as a roar that sent pain through her chest, but she didn't care. Now! Gordon fled. Vivian's doctor rushed back in. Ms. Ashford, you need to stay calm. Your heart... My heart stopped beating, and a man named Caleb Mercer brought me back. Vivian's hands were shaking. And my company destroyed him for it. I need my phone. I need my laptop. You need rest. Doctor's orders. I need to find Caleb Mercer. It took her 2 days to get strong enough to leave bed. Another day to convince her medical team she wasn't going to immediately collapse again. By then, she'd had her assistant compile everything. Caleb's employment file, the news articles, the social media posts, the leaked photograph, the address where he lived. The picture painted itself in brutal detail. A 34-year-old single father, former EMT who'd lost his certification over a DUI, working 2 jobs to support his daughter, fired from both after saving Vivian's life, evicted, publicly destroyed, and it was all her company's fault. No, it was her fault. Her empire, her CFO, her security team, her culture that protected optics over human decency. Vivian sat in the back of her town car, staring at the address in a neighborhood she'd never had reason to visit. Her driver looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, are you sure about this? This area isn't... We could send someone else to... I'm sure. The building was exactly what she expected. Run down, covered in graffiti, bars on the ground floor windows. The kind of place people lived when they had no other choices left. Vivian climbed out of the car despite her driver's protests. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to work. She'd spent 3 days in bed. Caleb Mercer had spent a week being destroyed by her company. The least she could do was walk up 3 flights of stairs. The climb left her winded and dizzy. She stood outside apartment 3B, breathing hard, wondering what the hell she was going to say. An elderly black woman opened the door across the hall before Vivian could knock. Can I help you? I'm looking for Caleb Mercer. I know who you are. The woman's voice was cool. Seen you on TV. You're the one he saved. Yes, I need to see him, to thank him, He's not here. Vivian's stomach dropped. Where is he? The woman studied her for a long moment. You really don't know, do you? Your people been destroying that man for a week. Fired him, got him evicted, turned the whole city against him, and you sitting in your mansion don't even know where he ended up. Please, Vivian said, tell me where he is. St. Vincent's Hospital, collapsed Sunday morning, pneumonia, dehydration, infected injuries from when your security guards beat him. The woman's eyes blazed. That man kept you alive while they hit him. Now he's the one fighting to stay breathing. The world tilted. Vivian grabbed the doorframe. Which hospital? St. Vincent's, but his daughter's here. Lily. I've been watching her while he's gone. The woman's expression shifted slightly. She don't need to know her daddy might die because he saved the wrong person's life. I need to see her, please. You need to leave that child alone. The woman stepped forward, blocking her apartment door. You and your company done enough damage. I'm going to fix this. Vivian's voice cracked. I swear to you, I'm going to fix this. Words are easy. That man lying in a hospital bed because he believed in doing the right thing. You want to fix something? Start by telling the truth about what he did. Vivian nodded, tears burning in her eyes. I will. I promise. She stumbled back down the stairs, her heart pounding too hard, her breath coming in gasps. Her driver rushed to help her into the car. St. Vincent's Hospital, Vivian said. Now. The hospital's ICU was a maze of beeping machines and antiseptic smell. Vivian lied to the front desk, said she was family, and a tired nurse directed her to room 437. Caleb Mercer lay in the bed looking like he'd been through a war. IV lines ran into both arms. An oxygen mask covered his nose and mouth. Monitors tracked his vitals in steady, fragile rhythms. His face was a map of bruises. Some faded to yellow, others still purple-black. His chart hung at the foot of the bed. Bacterial pneumonia, severe dehydration, 3 cracked ribs, concussion. Vivian stood in the doorway and felt something crack open inside her chest. This man had saved her life, and this was how she'd repaid him. She pulled a chair to his bedside and sat down, her own body protesting the movement. Up close, she could see more details. The calluses on his hands from hard work, the scar above his left eyebrow, the way his chest hitched with each breath like even unconscious. His body was still fighting. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Caleb's eyes opened, just a crack, foggy with medication and fever. "You're alive," he rasped through the oxygen mask. "Because of you." Vivian leaned forward. "Mr. Mercer, I saw the security footage. I know what you did, what they did to you." He tried to speak, coughed instead. The sound was wet and painful. "Don't talk. Please, just listen." Vivian pulled out her phone and opened a document. "I'm having my legal team draft a formal statement clearing your name completely. I'm going to personally make sure every news outlet that ran that story prints a retraction. I'm going to, Lily." The word came out desperate. "My daughter, where?" "She's safe. Your neighbor is taking care of her. Mrs. Hattie, Mrs. Lane." Caleb's eyes were starting to clear, focusing on her with an intensity that made Vivian want to look away. "You shouldn't be here. Your company will. My company will do exactly what I tell them to do." Vivian's voice turned to steel. "And what I'm telling them is that you are not the villain in this story. They are." "Nobody's going to believe that." Caleb coughed again, his whole body spasming with the effort. "I'm just the help. You're Vivian Ashford. You're the man who saved my life while getting beaten for it." Vivian stood up, her mind racing with everything she needed to do. "I'm going to make this right, Mr. Mercer. All of it. Your job, your reputation, your medical bills. Don't want charity. This isn't charity, it's justice." She looked down at him, this broken man who'd risked everything for a stranger. "When you get out of here, we're going to talk about what happened, about what happens next. But right now, you need to focus on getting better. Your daughter needs you." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of hope. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because the last thing I remember before dying was thinking that I'd built an empire on efficiency and profit. And the first thing I learned after coming back was that my empire values its image more than human life." Vivian's throat tightened. "You deserve better. You deserve better. And I'm going to spend however long it takes making sure you get it." She left before he could respond, before the emotion threatening to overflow could spill out in front of him. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and called her executive assistant. "Patricia, I need an emergency board meeting tomorrow, non-negotiable. And I need Gordon Price's complete employment file, every communication he's sent in the last 2 weeks, and the contact information for our head of security." "Ms. Ashford, are you sure you're well enough to—" "Tomorrow, Patricia. This can't wait." She hung up and made her next call, to the best crisis management firm in Philadelphia, then to her personal lawyer, then to the Philadelphia Daily Pulse's editor-in-chief, whom she'd met at fundraisers and who owed her at least one favor. By the time her driver got her home, Vivian had made 17 calls and set in motion a response that would either save Caleb Mercer's life or destroy what was left of her own reputation. She didn't care which. Some things mattered more than optics. Caleb drifted in and out of consciousness for the next 36 hours. The antibiotics were working, but slowly, his body too run down from weeks of stress and inadequate food to mount a quick defense. In his fever dreams, he relived that boardroom over and over. Vivian's blue lips, the executives screaming, the guards' fists, the terrible certainty that he'd failed. Then he'd wake up to the steady beep of monitors and remember. She'd lived. Whatever else happened, Vivian Ashford was alive. On Tuesday afternoon, his nurse, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, came in with his medication and a small smile. "You've got visitors," she said. A very persistent 8-year-old and the neighbor who wouldn't take no for an answer. Caleb's heart surged. "Lily?" Hospital policy says no kids in ICU, but your Mrs. Lane made a compelling case. Patricia winked. 5 minutes. Don't tell my supervisor. Then Lily was there, climbing carefully onto his bed, her small body warm and solid and real against his side. She smelled like Mrs. Hattie's lavender soap. "Hi, baby girl," Caleb whispered, wrapping his arm around her. "You scared me." Lily's voice was muffled against his hospital gown. "You promised you wouldn't leave." "I'm not leaving. I'm right here." He kissed the top of her head. "I'm going to get better, and then we're going to figure everything out. I promise." Mrs. Hattie stood at the foot of the bed, her eyes shining with tears she was too proud to shed. That woman came by, Vivian Ashford, said she's going to make things right. Caleb's chest tightened, and not from the pneumonia. "She was here?" "At the apartment first, then she went looking for you." Mrs. Hattie pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. "This went live an hour ago." It was a video. Vivian Ashford sitting in what looked like her home office, wearing a simple black sweater, no makeup, looking smaller and more human than she ever appeared in corporate settings. Caleb tapped play. "My name is Vivian Ashford," she began, her voice clear and steady. 8 days ago, I went into sudden cardiac arrest during a board meeting. I should have died. According to my doctors, I was approximately 60 seconds from irreversible brain damage when someone started CPR. She paused, and something raw crossed her face. That someone was Caleb Mercer, a member of our janitorial staff, a former EMT, a single father who was working 2 jobs to support his daughter. When my heart stopped, 23 executives froze. Mr. Mercer acted. He performed CPR exactly as he'd been trained. He gave rescue breaths. He kept going even when my security team attacked him. And yes, I mean attacked. They beat him while he was trying to save my life. Vivian's hands were shaking slightly. She didn't try to hide it. My company responded to this act of heroism by firing Mr. Mercer, leaking a misleading photograph to the press, and allowing a narrative to spread that transformed life-saving CPR into assault. We destroyed his reputation, cost him both his jobs, got him evicted, and we did all of this to protect our image. She leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. I am here to state unequivocally, Caleb Mercer saved my life. He did nothing wrong. Everything done to him afterward was a betrayal of the most fundamental human decency. I take full responsibility for the culture that allowed this to happen, and I am committed to making this right, not just for Mr. Mercer, but for every employee who has been treated as disposable by this company. The video continued for another 3 minutes, Vivian outlining specific actions she was taking, reforms she was implementing, and her personal commitment to ensuring Caleb was fully compensated and vindicated. When it ended, Caleb just stared at the blank screen. It's been shared 80,000 times, Mrs. Hattie said quietly. Every news outlet is picking it up. People are demanding the full security footage, demanding Gordon Price resign. Is this real? Caleb's voice was hoarse. This doesn't happen. People like me don't get justice, Mrs. Hattie finished. Maybe they do when people like her decide to fight for it. Lily looked up at him with eyes too old for 8 years. Does this mean the bad stuff goes away? Caleb wanted to say yes, wanted to promise her that one video would fix everything. The eviction, the destroyed reputation, the neighbors who'd looked at him like he was dangerous. But he'd learned the hard way that the world didn't work like that. It means things might get better, he said carefully. But it's going to take time, baby girl. People believed bad things about me. It's going to take a while to change their minds. But Ms. Ashford believes you, Lily said. That's something, right? It was something. Maybe it was enough. The emergency board meeting happened Wednesday morning. Vivian attended via video conference from her home office, still too weak for the office, but too angry to wait any longer. Gordon Price sat at the head of the conference table looking cornered. The other board members, 12 people who'd built fortunes on pharmaceutical patents and strategic acquisitions, looked uncomfortable with being summoned on 12 hours' notice. Thank you all for coming, Vivian began. I'll be brief. 8 days ago, I went into cardiac arrest during a presentation. A member of our janitorial staff, Caleb Mercer, performed CPR and saved my life. In response, our CFO Gordon Price orchestrated a campaign to fire Mr. Mercer, destroy his reputation, and bury the truth in order to protect the company's image. Gordon opened his mouth. Vivian cut him off. I have reviewed the complete security footage. I have reviewed the internal communications. I have reviewed the decision chain that led to leaking a misleading photograph to the press. She pulled up documents on the shared screen. Gordon, you personally approved the statement that characterized life-saving CPR as inappropriate contact. You personally authorized payment to a Daily Pulse junior reporter in exchange for running the story with minimal fact-checking. You personally blocked HR from conducting a proper investigation. The other board members were staring at Gordon now, their expressions shifting from discomfort to calculation. This is damage control, Gordon protested. Vivian, I was protecting you from what? From the truth? Vivian's voice was ice. From the man who saved my life getting credit for it? Or were you protecting yourself from the liability of allowing security to assault an employee? He refused to stop. He was performing CPR, which you would know if you'd bothered to watch the full footage before destroying his life. Vivian pulled up the security video and forced them all to watch it. Every second, every blow, every moment Caleb kept fighting to reach her. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Gordon, you're fired, Vivian said. Effective immediately. You'll receive severance as outlined in your contract, but you will never work in this industry again if I have anything to say about it. And I promise you, I have a lot to say about it. You can't do this. Gordon's face went purple. I have contracts. I have a choice, Vivian interrupted. Accept severance and leave quietly, or I release these communications publicly, and you explain to the world why you thought protecting optics was more important than basic human decency. Your call. Gordon grabbed his briefcase and stormed out. Vivian turned to the head of security, a man named Patterson who'd been sitting very quietly in the corner. You're also terminated. Your team assaulted an employee who was saving my life. That's unacceptable. Miss Ashford, we were following protocols. Then the protocols are wrong. Fix them or leave. Those are your options. Patterson stood and walked out without another word. The remaining board members looked shell-shocked. I'm instituting a complete review of our employee policies, Vivian continued. We're going to examine every case of termination, every complaint filed, every incident report from the last 5 years. And we're going to ask ourselves, are we treating people with the basic dignity they deserve, or are we treating them as disposable? Vivian, one of the board members, an older woman named Helena, spoke up gently. We understand you're upset. What happened to that man was terrible, but a complete policy overhaul. That's going to cost millions. It's going to slow down operations. Shareholders are going to deal with it, Vivian snapped. Because the alternative is watching this company implode under the weight of its own cruelty. We built this empire by being smart, by being efficient. But somewhere along the way we forgot to be human. That ends now. She ended the call before anyone could argue, then immediately collapsed back in her chair, her heart racing dangerously. Her doctor, who'd been standing by, rushed over. That's enough. You need to rest. I need to finish this. You need to not have another cardiac arrest. He helped her to the couch, adjusted her medication. You can't fix everything in one day. I can try. But her body had other ideas. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind exhaustion so profound she could barely keep her eyes open. Her doctor insisted she sleep, and for once, Vivian didn't fight him. She dreamed of Caleb Mercer's voice calling her back from the dark, of his hands on her chest, refusing to give up even as they beat him, of the crushing weight of knowing she'd almost let him die invisible. When Vivian woke 6 hours later, her phone had exploded with notifications. The video had gone viral, 2 million views and climbing. News outlets were demanding interviews. Social media had turned Caleb Mercer from villain to hero in the span of a single news cycle. And buried in the avalanche of messages was one that made her sit up despite her doctor's protests. It was from her head of PR, marked urgent. Gordon Price just gave an interview to Channel 6. He's claiming you're having a mental breakdown and that Caleb Mercer manipulated you while you were vulnerable. They're airing it tonight at 6. Vivian checked the time. 5:45. She turned on the television and waited, her jaw clenched so tight it ached. Gordon appeared on screen at exactly 6 o'clock, sitting in someone's tastefully decorated living room, wearing a concerned expression that would have been convincing if Vivian hadn't worked with him for 15 years. I want to be clear, Gordon was saying. I have nothing but respect for Vivian Ashford. She built an incredible company, but she's not well. She went through a traumatic medical event, and I think, and her doctors would probably agree, that she's not in a position to make sound decisions right now. The interviewer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Torres, leaned forward. Are you suggesting Ms. Ashford's statement about Caleb Mercer was inaccurate? I'm suggesting she's viewing the incident through the lens of trauma and gratitude, which is understandable. But the fact remains that this man, this janitor, put his mouth on her while she was unconscious, in front of witnesses. That's not appropriate, regardless of his intentions. The security footage shows him performing CPR. The security footage shows what looks like CPR, but we don't know what his actual training was. We don't know what his motivations were. Gordon's voice dropped to something that sounded like sympathy. Look, I feel for the guy. I really do. But Vivian's not thinking clearly. She fired me for trying to protect her. She's talking about policy overhauls that could cost the company hundreds of millions. That's not the rational, brilliant CEO I've worked with for over a decade. That's someone who needs help. Vivian felt rage ignite in her chest, white hot and clarifying. She grabbed her phone and called Rebecca Torres directly. The reporter answered on the second ring. Ms. Ashford, I'm in the middle of... I know, I'm watching. Give me 2 minutes of airtime, right now, live. Rebecca hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then Vivian heard her say off camera, keep Gordon talking. We've got a live call coming in. 30 seconds later, Vivian was on speaker, her voice broadcasting into living rooms across Philadelphia. Gordon, she said, her tone pleasant and deadly, thank you for your concern about my mental health. Let me address it directly. I'm not having a breakdown. I am having a reckoning. There's a difference. Gordon's face on screen went pale. You want to talk about appropriate behavior? Vivian continued. Let's talk about how you paid a reporter $3,000 to run a story without fact-checking. Let's talk about how you personally reviewed security footage showing Caleb Mercer being assaulted while saving my life and decided the appropriate response was to fire him. Let's talk about the internal memo you sent to HR saying, and I quote, we cannot allow the optics of a black male employee putting his hands on Ms. Ashford to become public in any positive context. She heard Rebecca's sharp intake of breath. That memo is time-stamped 2 hours after my cardiac arrest, Vivian said, which means while I was fighting for my life in a hospital, you were already crafting a narrative to destroy the man who saved me. And you want to tell the public that I'm the one not thinking clearly? Gordon tried to speak. Vivian rolled over him. I have documentation of everything, every payment, every communication, every decision you made to prioritize image over truth. And if you continue this campaign to discredit me or Caleb Mercer, I will release all of it. So here's my suggestion, Gordon. Take your severance, disappear quietly, and count yourself lucky that I'm not pursuing criminal charges for assault conspiracy. She hung up. The silence from the television lasted exactly 5 seconds before Rebecca Torres said, well, I think we just got our answer about Ms. Ashford's mental clarity. Vivian turned off the TV and immediately called her lawyer. I need everything we have on Gordon Price ready for potential release. Every email, every memo, every payment record. If he gives one more interview, we bury him. Consider it done, her lawyer said. Vivian, are you sure you want to go this hard? This could get very ugly very quickly. It's already ugly. I'm just making sure everyone can see it clearly. She ended the call and sat in the sudden quiet of her bedroom, her heart pounding too fast again, her body reminding her that she was supposed to be recovering, not waging war. But some wars couldn't wait for convenient timing. Caleb watched the interview from his hospital bed, Mrs. Hattie and Lily on either side of him. When Vivian's voice came through the phone line, sharp and furious and absolutely in control, he felt something shift in his chest. She was fighting for him. Actually fighting. Not with empty promises or corporate PR speak, but with documented evidence and the full weight of her power. She's really doing it, he whispered. Told you, Mrs. Hattie said with satisfaction. That woman's got steel in her spine. Lily looked up at him. Does this mean people will stop being mean? Caleb wanted to say yes. but he'd learned not to promise things he couldn't guarantee. It means some people will start seeing the truth. That's a good start. His phone, which had been mercifully quiet while he was unconscious, began buzzing. Text messages from former coworkers at the warehouse, calls from people he vaguely remembered from his EMT days, even a message from his ex-wife Vanessa, who'd left when Lily was 2 and hadn't spoken to him in 6 years. Saw the news. Always knew you were a good man. Sorry for everything. Too little, too late. But Caleb appreciated the sentiment anyway. The nurse came in to check his vitals and found him staring at his phone with an expression somewhere between shock and disbelief. "Good news?" she asked, adjusting his IV. "I think so. People are apologizing for believing the first story." "That's how it works." She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his arm. "First story gets the headlines. Truth gets the footnotes. You're lucky Ms. Ashford decided to make your truth the headline." "Yeah," Caleb said quietly. "Lucky." But it didn't feel like luck. It felt like being visible for the first time in his life, not as a problem to be solved or a body to be exploited, but as a person who mattered. The feeling was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. By Thursday morning, the story had reached national news. CNN ran a segment on corporate accountability. The New York Times published an op-ed about the invisibility of essential workers. Social media was flooded with stories from people who'd been fired, discredited, or punished for doing the right thing. Caleb became a symbol, which was uncomfortable and strange and not at all what he'd signed up for when he started CPR. His hospital room turned into a rotating circus of visitors. His former warehouse supervisor showed up with an apology and a job offer that Caleb politely declined. A lawyer specializing in wrongful termination offered to represent him pro bono in any lawsuits he wanted to file. 3 different news outlets wanted exclusive interviews. He said no to all of them. "I just want to get better and get back to my daughter," he told each person who asked. "That's all." But the world wasn't ready to let him be just Caleb Mercer, single dad, anymore. They wanted him to be Caleb Mercer, hero, symbol, spokesman for every worker who'd ever been chewed up and spit out by corporate machinery. On Friday afternoon, Vivian showed up at his hospital room unannounced. Caleb was sitting up in bed, breathing without the oxygen mask for the first time in days, when she knocked gently on the doorframe. "Mr. Mercer," she said. "May I come in?" He nodded, suddenly very aware that he was wearing a hospital gown and probably looked like hell. Vivian pulled a chair to his bedside and sat down carefully, moving like someone whose body was still remembering how to work properly. Up close, Caleb could see the exhaustion around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Better. Antibiotics are working. Ribs still hurt, but the doctor says I can probably go home in a few days." He paused. "How are you?" "Recovering, slowly." She smiled faintly. Apparently, cardiac arrest takes a while to bounce back from. "Yeah," Caleb said. "I remember." They sat in silence for a moment, 2 people who'd pulled each other back from death without really knowing each other at all. "I wanted to thank you," Vivian said finally. "Not just for saving my life, for being willing to fight through what my company did to you. A lesser person would have had options," Caleb interrupted gently. "I didn't. When you've got nothing left to lose, you fight because it's the only thing you can do." Vivian flinched. "You shouldn't have been put in that position." "No, but I was. And now I'm here." Caleb looked at her directly. "What happens next?" "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Vivian pulled out a folder from her bag. "I've had my legal team working on a comprehensive settlement. All your medical bills paid in full. Back pay for both jobs you lost. Housing assistance, enough to cover rent and security deposit on a new apartment. And a formal, notarized statement clearing your name completely, which we'll distribute to every outlet that ran the original story." Caleb stared at the folder. That's too much." "It's the bare minimum of what you're owed." Vivian opened the folder, showing him documents with numbers that made his head spin. "But there's something else, something I want to propose, though you're under no obligation to accept." "What?" "I want to create a new position at Ashford Industries, Director of Employee Welfare, Someone who advocates for the workers everyone else forgets about. Someone who can identify problems before they become catastrophes. Someone who understands what it's like to be invisible. She paused. I want that person to be you. Caleb's brain short-circuited. You want to hire me after everything that happened? Not hire, partner with. This wouldn't be charity or some feel-good PR move. I need someone who knows what it's like on the ground floor. Someone who won't be afraid to tell me when the company is screwing up. Someone who can build systems that actually protect people instead of protecting image. I'm not qualified for something like that. I'm a janitor. I was an EMT. I don't know anything about corporate. You know more than you think. Vivian's voice was firm. You know what it feels like to work 2 jobs and still not make ends meet. You know what it's like to be treated as disposable. You know what it's like when the system is designed to chew people up. That's exactly the expertise I need. Caleb's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs. Why me? You could hire someone with degrees, experience, actual credentials. Because someone with credentials would design programs that look good on paper and do nothing in practice. Vivian leaned forward. I don't want good optics, Mr. Mercer. I want real change. And I think you're the person who can help me build it. I need to think about it, Caleb said. I need to talk to my daughter. I need to take all the time you need, Vivian said. The offer stands whenever you're ready. But Caleb? She used his first name for the first time. You saved my life. Now let me help you build one worth living. She left the folder on his bedside table and walked out, leaving Caleb staring at documents that promised a future he'd never dared to imagine. Mrs. Hattie brought Lily to visit that evening. His daughter climbed carefully onto the bed, curled against his side, and said, The kids at school are being nice again. Madison's mom apologized for saying you were bad. That's good, baby girl. Mrs. Hattie says we might get a new apartment, one without roaches. Caleb's throat tightened. Yeah, maybe. And she says maybe you're going to have a new job, an important one. He looked over Lily's head at Mrs. Hattie, who shrugged unapologetically. Child's been through enough. She deserves to know good things are coming. Are they? Lily asked, her voice very small. Good things? Caleb thought about the folder on his bedside table, about Vivian Ashford's offer, about the possibility of a life where he wasn't constantly scrambling, constantly invisible, constantly one crisis away from collapse. It felt impossible, but then again, so did everything that had happened in the last 2 weeks. Yeah, baby, he said quietly. I think maybe they are. That night, after Mrs. Hattie took Lily home, Caleb opened the folder and read every document. The settlement was generous, more money than he'd made in the last 3 years combined. The job description was intimidating, responsibilities he wasn't sure he could handle, expectations he wasn't sure he could meet. But buried in the formal language was something else. A chance to make sure what happened to him didn't happen to someone else. A chance to be the voice for people who'd been silent for too long. A chance to matter. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Vivian. No pressure on the job. But if you decide yes, we start building something real. If you decide no, the settlement stands and I'll still fight to make things right. You don't owe me anything, but I hope you'll consider it. VA. Caleb stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, I'll think about it, and thank you for everything. The response came immediately. Thank you for not giving up, on me or yourself. Caleb was discharged from the hospital on Monday, 11 days after collapsing on his bathroom floor. The doctors wanted him to stay longer, but his insurance, which Vivian had quietly upgraded without telling him, only covered so much, and he was desperate to get back to Lily. Mrs. Hattie picked him up in her ancient Toyota, chattering the whole drive about how Lily had been doing in school, how the apartment manager had been sniffing around asking questions, how the whole neighborhood was buzzing about their hero. You're famous now, she said, pulling up to their building. Everybody knows what you did. I just want things to go back to normal, Caleb said. Honey, normal wasn't working for you. Maybe famous is better. The apartment felt different when he walked in. Not physically, still the same cramped space with peeling paint and questionable plumbing. But the atmosphere had shifted. Lily had drawn a "Welcome Home, Daddy" sign and taped it to the wall. Someone had left a casserole on the counter with a note. From 2B, proud to have a hero in the building. Caleb sat on the couch and felt tears threaten for the first time since all of this started. He'd been so focused on surviving, on fighting, on just making it through each day that he hadn't let himself feel the weight of it. Now, in the quiet safety of his home with his daughter asleep in the next room, it all crashed down. He cried silently, his shoulders shaking, his breath hitching in his damaged ribs. Cried for the week he'd spent being destroyed, for the fear that he'd failed Lily, for the humiliation and pain and desperate clawing hopelessness. And then he cried from relief, because he'd survived, because Vivian had fought for him, because maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. When Lily woke up and found him on the couch, she crawled into his lap without a word and held him the way he'd held her through every nightmare, every hard day, every moment when the world felt too big and scary. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. "I love you too, baby girl, so much." They sat like that until the morning light started filtering through the windows, two people who'd survived something terrible and were still here, still together, still fighting. The next morning, Caleb called Vivian. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Mercer, how are you feeling?" "Sore, tired, but alive." He took a breath. "I've been thinking about your offer." "And?" "I want to say yes, but I need to be honest with you. I don't know if I can do this. I don't have the education or the experience or the—" "Caleb," Vivian's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers. I'm asking you to help me ask the right questions. Can you do that?" He thought about every time he'd watched a coworker get fired for being sick, every time he'd seen someone choose between rent and food, every time the system had chewed up someone who deserved better. "Yeah," he said. "I can do that." "Then we start next week. I'm setting up an office for you at headquarters. You'll have a team, a budget, and full authority to investigate any employee welfare concerns. You report directly to me, and you have my complete support to make whatever changes you think are necessary. What if I screw up? Then we learn from it and try again." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Caleb, I didn't survive cardiac arrest just to play it safe. Let's build something that matters." After they hung up, Caleb sat with his phone in his hand and tried to process what he'd just agreed to. Director of Employee Welfare at one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the region. It was absurd. It was terrifying. It was the chance of a lifetime. Mrs. Hattie knocked on his door an hour later with Lily in tow. "Got a delivery for you downstairs. Big fancy car. Driver says it's from Ms. Ashford." Caleb went down to find a moving truck parked at the curb. The driver handed him an envelope. Inside was a key and a note in Vivian's handwriting. "New apartment. 3-bedroom, safe neighborhood, good schools. First year's rent paid. You need stability to do this work. Consider it an investment in the program. VA." The address was in a neighborhood Caleb had driven through but never imagined living in. Tree-lined streets, parks, a coffee shop on the corner. He looked at Mrs. Hattie, who was reading over his shoulder. "Well," she said, "what are you waiting for? Let's go see your new home." The apartment was on the second floor of a well-maintained building. Hardwood floors, big windows, a kitchen that didn't have exposed wiring. 3 bedrooms, one for him, one for Lily, and one that could be an office or a guest room, or just space to breathe. Lily ran from room to room, her delighted squeals echoing off the walls. "Dad, there's a bathtub, a real bathtub." Mrs. Hattie squeezed his arm. "You did good, child. You fought for what was right, and now you get to build something beautiful. Don't you dare doubt yourself." "What if I'm not enough?" Caleb whispered. "You jumped into that boardroom when everyone else froze. You kept doing CPR while they beat you. You survived pneumonia and public humiliation and kept getting up." She turned him to face her, her eyes fierce. "If that's not enough, nothing is." Oh, the following Monday, Caleb walked into Ashford Industries headquarters wearing a suit Mrs. Hattie had insisted on buying him, second-hand but tailored to fit, making him look like someone who belonged in a corporate building. The lobby receptionist directed him to the 43rd floor, his new office. Vivian was waiting when the elevator doors opened. She looked stronger than when he'd seen her in the hospital, though still moving carefully. "Welcome," she said, extending her hand. "Ready to change some lives?" Ready to try, Caleb said, shaking her hand. She led him down a hallway to a corner office with windows overlooking the city. His name was already on the door. Caleb Mercer, Director of Employee Welfare. Inside, 3 people were waiting. Vivian introduced them as his team, an HR specialist named Marcus who'd been secretly documenting problems for years, a data analyst named Priya who could track patterns in employee complaints, and a social worker named James who'd been volunteering with homeless populations and understood systemic failure. They all volunteered for this, Vivian said, because they believe in what we're building. Caleb looked at these 3 strangers who'd signed up to work with him and felt overwhelmed. Marcus stepped forward first. Mr. Mercer, I've been watching this company burn through good people for 8 years. If you're serious about changing things, I'm with you all the way. I'm serious, Caleb said. But I'm going to need your help, all of you, because I don't know what I'm doing. None of us do, Priya said with a grin. That's why this might actually work. We're not following some corporate playbook. We're building something new. Vivian left them to get acquainted, but not before pulling Caleb aside. One more thing. Gordon Price tried to leak more stories this weekend. My lawyers shut him down, but he's not going to give up easily. You need to be prepared for pushback from him, from board members who think this is all performative, from managers who don't want oversight. I can handle it, Caleb said, hoping it was true. I know you can. Vivian smiled. That's why you're here. The first week was baptism by fire. Caleb spent Monday learning the company's organizational structure, which was a maze of departments, hierarchies, and power dynamics he'd never seen from the janitorial closet. Marcus walked him through 8 years of documented complaints, everything from wage theft to sexual harassment to managers forcing employees to work through injuries. The files filled 3 bankers' boxes and represented hundreds of people whose voices had been ignored. This is just what I could document without getting fired, Marcus said quietly. There's probably twice as much that never got reported. Caleb stared at the boxes and felt rage settle into his bones, the cold, focused kind that didn't burn out quickly. We're fixing this, all of it. That's ambitious, Priya said. She'd been running data analytics, mapping complaint patterns across departments. The legal department alone has suppressed 43 harassment complaints in the last 2 years. Settlements with NDAs. The pattern suggests systematic protection of managers over employees. Who's the head of legal? Caleb asked. Richard Vance. Been here 20 years, reports directly to the board. Set up a meeting this week. James, the social worker, looked up from the case file he'd been reading. You sure you want to go after legal in your first week? That's declaring war. Good, Caleb said. Let them know we're serious. The meeting with Richard Vance happened Thursday afternoon in a conference room that smelled like leather and old money. Vance was 60, silver-haired, with the kind of polished arrogance that came from never being challenged. He looked Caleb up and down like something he'd scraped off his shoe. Mr. Mercer, I hear you're our new director of, what was it? Employee welfare. The term sounded ridiculous in his mouth, like a joke he didn't get. That's right. Caleb sat down without being invited. Marcus and Priya flanked him. We need to discuss your department's handling of employee complaints. Our handling is legally sound and in full compliance with... Your handling has been bearing legitimate complaints to protect the company's reputation. Caleb slid a folder across the table. 43 harassment cases settled with NDAs in 2 years. That's not compliance. That's cover-up. Vance's face went cold. Those settlements protected the company from frivolous lawsuits. That's my job. Your job is to ensure legal compliance and ethical practice. Silencing victims isn't either of those things. Caleb opened the folder, revealing case summaries Marcus had compiled. Jessica Chen, logistics coordinator, reported her supervisor for repeated unwanted touching. Your department offered her $20,000 and an NDA. He's still employed. She's gone. That was a he said, she said situation with no witnesses. There were 3 witnesses. They all corroborated her story. Your department never interviewed them. Caleb pulled out another file. David Morrison, warehouse supervisor, reported safety violations that put workers at risk of chemical exposure. Your department threatened him with termination for creating a hostile work environment. He resigned. The violations were never addressed. 2 workers were hospitalized 3 months later. Vance's jaw tightened. You're misrepresenting complex legal situations. I'm reading your own case files. Caleb's voice was quiet but harder than steel. And here's what's going to happen. Every NDA settlement from the last 5 years gets reviewed. Every complaint that was suppressed gets reopened. And any manager or executive who's been protected through legal maneuvering gets investigated properly by my team, with full cooperation from your department. That's absurd. You can't just... I report directly to Vivian Ashford with full authority over employee welfare matters. She signed off on this review yesterday. Caleb stood up. You can cooperate, or you can explain to the board why you're obstructing an investigation she personally authorized. Your choice. Vance stared at him with pure hatred. You're making a mistake. You have no idea how things work in the real world. I know exactly how they work, Caleb said. I spent years being chewed up by how they work. That's why I'm here, to make them work differently. He walked out with Marcus and Priya following, leaving Vance sputtering in the conference room. That, Priya said once they were safely in the elevator, was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Probably both, Caleb admitted. His hands were shaking with adrenaline. But we can't build something real if we're afraid of the people who broke the old system. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. You're going to have enemies now, powerful ones. Good, let them come. But that night, alone in his new apartment while Lily slept in her own room for the first time, Caleb felt the weight of what he'd started. He'd just declared war on an entrenched legal department, pissed off executives who'd spent decades building their fiefdoms, put a target on his back. His phone buzzed, a text from Vivian. Heard about the Vance meeting? Well done. Prepare for retaliation. We'll handle it together. The next morning, retaliation came exactly as predicted. Caleb arrived at the office to find an email from HR. Not his team, but the traditional HR department he was technically separate from, requesting his full employment history, background check authorization, and financial disclosures. The message was polite and bureaucratic and clearly designed to dig up anything they could use against him. He forwarded it to Vivian with a single line. Is this normal? Her response came within minutes. No. It's intimidation. Ignore it. I'll handle HR. 20 minutes later, the head of HR, a woman named Patricia Hirsch, who'd been with the company for 30 years, appeared at Caleb's door looking furious. Mr. Mercer, I don't know what you think you're doing, but requesting confidential legal files without proper authorization is grounds for... I have proper authorization, Caleb said calmly, from the CEO, who created my position specifically to investigate these issues. The CEO is not above company policy. There are protocols, procedures. There are also employees who've been harassed, discriminated against, and silenced. Your protocols protected their abusers. Caleb stood up, using his height advantage. If you want to fight me on this, take it up with Vivian, but I'm not backing down. Patricia's face went purple. You have no idea what you're interfering with. These cases were settled, closed. Reopening them will cost millions in legal fees and expose systematic abuse that should never have been tolerated in the first place. Caleb's voice was quiet. I'm not interested in protecting the company's bottom line at the expense of human dignity. If that's a problem for you, maybe you're in the wrong job. Patricia stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. James poked his head in from the adjoining office. You're making friends everywhere, I see. That's not why I'm here. Good, because you're about to make a lot more enemies. He was right. By the end of the second week, Caleb had received 3 formal complaints about his conduct, all from department heads whose records showed patterns of employee mistreatment. The complaints were vague and clearly coordinated: unprofessional behavior, overstepping authority, creating a hostile work environment. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Vivian called him into her office on Friday afternoon. She looked tired but determined, papers spread across her desk. They're trying to build a case to have you removed, she said without preamble. 3 formal complaints, a petition from 5 department heads requesting your position be eliminated, and Richard Vance has been talking to board members about liability concerns. Caleb's stomach dropped. So I'm out? Absolutely not. Vivian's eyes flashed. But we need to be strategic. They're going to scrutinize everything you do, every decision, every investigation, every interaction. We can't give them ammunition. I've been doing everything by the book. I know, but they'll twist it anyway. She handed him a document. I've retained an outside law firm to audit your investigations. Everything transparent, everything documented. If they want to come after you, they'll have to go through independent verification first. Caleb scanned the document. This is expensive. So is losing you? Vivian leaned back in her chair. You're doing exactly what I hired you to do, holding people accountable. But power doesn't surrender easily. We have to be smarter than them, more prepared, more thorough. Can you do that? Yes. Good. Because next week we're presenting your first major finding to the board, the Jessica Chen case. We're going to recommend terminating her former supervisor and offering her a formal apology plus compensation. It's going to be ugly. Will the board support it? Some will, some won't, but I will. Vivian's expression softened slightly. Caleb, I know this is harder than you expected. If you want to step back, I don't. The words came out firm and certain. These people deserve someone fighting for them. I'm not quitting. Then let's make sure we win. The board presentation happened on Tuesday morning. Caleb stood in the same conference room where Vivian had fired Gordon Price, facing 12 people who collectively controlled billions of dollars and thousands of jobs. He'd rehearsed with Marcus and Priya all weekend, had every fact memorized, every document organized, every counter-argument prepared, but standing there in his second-hand suit, facing people who'd gone to Ivy League schools and sat on multiple corporate boards, he felt the full weight of the class divide. Mr. Mercer, Helena, the board member who'd questioned Vivian's policy overhaul, said coolly, "We understand you've been conducting investigations. We'd like to understand your findings." Caleb took a breath and began. He laid out Jessica Chen's case in methodical detail, the documented harassment, the witness statements that were never collected, the legal settlement that silenced her while protecting her abuser. He presented data showing this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern where legal settlements were being used to avoid accountability. The supervisor in question, Robert Brennan, has had 4 complaints filed against him in 6 years, Caleb said. Each time, legal settled quietly. Each time, he remained in his position. Each time, the complainant left the company. We're not protecting employees, we're protecting predators. A board member named Thomas Chen, no relation to Jessica, leaned forward. These complaints could be fabricated. Disgruntled employees looking for payouts. 4 different women over 6 years, all describing similar behavior, none of whom knew each other. Caleb kept his voice even. That's not disgruntled employees, that's a pattern. What you're describing could expose the company to significant liability if these cases are reopened. We're already exposed, Vivian cut in. The liability isn't in reopening the cases. It's in the fact that we allowed this behavior to continue. If any of these women decide to go public, and they'd be well within their rights to do so, we look like exactly what we are, a company that valued reputation over people. So your solution is to terminate a 20-year employee based on accusations, based on evidence, Caleb corrected. Multiple witness statements, pattern of behavior. And yes, I'm recommending termination, because keeping him sends a message to every employee that we tolerate abuse as long as you're valuable enough to protect. Richard Vance spoke up from the corner where he'd been lurking. Mr. Mercer, you've been in this position for 2 weeks. You're proposing massive policy changes based on incomplete understanding of complex legal and business realities. I'm proposing we stop hiding behind legal complexity to avoid doing what's right. Caleb turned to face him directly. You've built a system that protects the company at all costs, but the cost is people's dignity, safety, and livelihoods. That's not sustainable. That's not ethical. And it's not what this company should stand for. And what should we stand for? Vance's tone was mocking. Whatever moral absolutism you've decided is appropriate. We should stand for treating people like they matter. Caleb's voice rose slightly. For creating workplaces where employees don't have to choose between safety and employment. For accountability that applies to everyone, not just the powerless. Is that really such a radical concept? Silence fell across the room. Helena finally spoke. You're asking us to open ourselves up to lawsuits, negative press, and significant financial exposure based on principle. I'm asking you to do the right thing, Caleb said. And yes, that might be expensive, but how much has silence cost? How many talented people have we lost because we created an environment where abuse was tolerated? How much productivity, innovation, and loyalty have we sacrificed to protect people who don't deserve protection? Another board member, a younger man named David, spoke up. I'd like to hear Ms. Chen's testimony directly. Before we make any decisions, I think we owe her that. She signed an NDA, Vance said quickly. Which we can release her from, Vivian countered. And should. David's right. We should hear from her directly. After 2 hours of debate, the board agreed to 3 things. Jessica Chen would be released from her NDA, invited to testify, and offered preliminary compensation for the mishandling of her case. Robert Brennan would be placed on administrative leave pending full investigation, and Caleb's team would present a comprehensive review of all NDA settlements within 60 days. It wasn't everything Caleb wanted, but it was progress. As the board members filed out, Helena stopped beside him. You have courage, Mr. Mercer. I'll give you that. But courage without political intelligence gets crushed. Watch your back. It wasn't quite a threat, but it wasn't reassurance either. So, Jessica Chen agreed to meet with them on Thursday afternoon at a coffee shop far from Ashford Industries headquarters. Caleb went with Marcus, not wanting to overwhelm her with too many people. She was 32, petite, wearing a blazer that looked like armor against the world. Her eyes were wary when they sat down. Thank you for meeting with us, Caleb said gently. I know this isn't easy. Why are you doing this? Her voice was sharp. It's been 2 years. I moved on, got a new job, and now you want to drag it all back up? Because what happened to you was wrong, and the man who did it is still there, still in a position to hurt other people. Caleb kept his voice quiet. I'm not asking you to do anything you're uncomfortable with, but if you're willing to talk to the board to tell them what really happened, it could change things. Change things for who? For you? So you can feel good about your new job? Jessica's hands were trembling around her coffee cup. You have no idea what it cost me to come forward the first time. The meetings with lawyers who made me feel like I was lying. The settlement that felt like hush money, leaving a job I loved because staying meant seeing his face every day. You're right, Caleb said. I don't know what that feels like, but I know what it feels like to be treated like you're disposable, to have powerful people close ranks against you, to watch the system protect the people who hurt you. Something shifted in her expression. You're the janitor, the one who saved Vivian Ashford. Yeah. I saw what they did to you. The news, the articles, all of it. She studied him. And you came back? Took a job with them? I took a job trying to fix them. Or at least trying to make sure they can't keep destroying people like they destroyed you, and me, and everyone else they've used up and thrown away. Jessica was quiet for a long time. Then she said, What do you need from me? Marcus pulled out a folder. We'd like you to tell the board what happened. Your full story, unedited. We'll be there to support you. And afterward, we'd like to offer you a formal apology from the company and compensation for the harm done. Not hush money this time. Actual acknowledgement of wrongdoing. What happens to Brennan? If your testimony supports what we've already documented, he's terminated and will recommend policy changes to make sure this can't happen to anyone else. Jessica looked between them, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Not for you. For every woman who comes after me. So they don't have to go through what I went through. Thank you, Caleb said. Don't thank me yet. I might change my mind. But there was steel in her voice now. When do you need me? Next Tuesday, board meeting. We'll prepare you beforehand, walk you through what to expect. Jessica left 30 minutes later, and Caleb sat with Marcus in the suddenly quiet coffee shop. That was hard to watch, Marcus said quietly. Yeah. Caleb thought about Jessica's trembling hands, the way her voice had cracked when she talked about leaving her job. This is going to keep happening, isn't it? Every case we reopen, we're going to re-traumatize people all over again. Probably, but we're also giving them something they didn't have before. Validation, accountability, the knowledge that someone finally believes them and is willing to fight. Is that enough? It's more than they had yesterday. The weekend before Jessica's testimony, Gordon Price published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal titled, When Corporate Virtue Signaling Goes Too Far. He didn't name Caleb directly, but the implications were crystal clear. Vivian's employee welfare initiative was performative nonsense designed to distract from real business concerns. Caleb read it Sunday morning while Lily ate cereal and watched cartoons. Each paragraph was a masterclass in manipulation, twisting facts just enough to seem credible while painting Vivian as unstable and Caleb as an unqualified opportunist. His phone rang. "Vivian." "I saw it," Caleb said before she could speak. "We're releasing a response. My communications team is drafting it now." "Don't." Caleb surprised himself with the certainty in his voice. "Let me respond. Publicly. On my own terms." "Caleb, Gordon is a professional manipulator. If you engage directly, then people will see exactly who we are. Not corporate PR speak, not carefully managed messaging, just the truth." He took a breath. "Trust me. Please." Vivian was quiet for a moment, then, "Okay, but run it by me first." Caleb spent 2 hours writing. Not a polished corporate response, but something raw and real and entirely his own. He sent it to Vivian, who called back immediately. "This is perfect," she said. "Publish it." He posted it on LinkedIn that afternoon, a direct response to Gordon's op-ed. "Mr. Price calls employee welfare virtue signaling. I call it basic human decency. He says I'm unqualified for my position. He's right. I don't have an MBA or decades of corporate experience. What I have is first-hand knowledge of what it's like to be treated as disposable. I've been the person choosing between rent and food. The parent working 2 jobs and still falling short. The employee who gets destroyed for doing the right thing. Mr. Price thinks that makes me unqualified. I think it makes me exactly the right person for this job. Because I'm not here to protect corporate image, I'm here to protect people. And if that makes the comfortable uncomfortable, then we're doing something right." The post went viral within hours. Thousands of shares, comments from workers across industries sharing their own stories of being chewed up by corporate machinery, news outlets picking it up, and buried in the avalanche of support was a message from Gordon himself. "You have no idea what you've started. Enjoy it while it lasts." Caleb read the threat and felt something harden in his chest. Let him try. Tuesday's board meeting was different from the first. This time, Jessica Chen sat beside Caleb, her posture rigid with tension. Vivian had arranged for a trauma counselor to be available if Jessica needed support. Marcus and Priya flanked them like bodyguards. Helena called the meeting to order. "Ms. Chen, thank you for being here. We understand this is difficult. Please tell us in your own words what happened." Jessica's voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger as she spoke. She described 18 months of escalating harassment from Robert Brennan, comments about her appearance, unwanted touching disguised as mentorship, requests to meet privately that made her skin crawl. And when she finally reported it to HR, the immediate pressure to settle quietly. "They told me filing a formal complaint would damage my career," Jessica said, "that it would be my word against his, and he was well respected. They offered me money to sign an NDA and leave. I felt like I had no choice." "Did anyone investigate your claims?" David asked. "They interviewed me once, never talked to my coworkers who witnessed some of the incidents, never reviewed the emails Brennan sent me, never checked his calendar to verify the private meetings he kept requesting. They just made it go away." Her voice cracked. "Made me go away." Richard Vance shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Chen, I want to be clear that our legal team followed all appropriate protocols." "Your protocols protected my harasser and silenced me," Jessica said, her voice suddenly steel. "That's what your protocols did." The room fell silent. Helena spoke carefully. "Mr. Mercer, you've reviewed this case thoroughly. What's your recommendation?" "Terminate Robert Brennan immediately. Issue a formal apology to Ms. Chen, compensate her for lost wages and emotional harm, and most importantly, reform the entire complaint process so this can never happen again." Sheesh. Caleb pulled out the policy proposal his team had spent 2 weeks developing. "We need independent investigation of all harassment complaints. We need to eliminate NDAs in settlement agreements. We need to protect complainants instead of punishing them. And we need real consequences for people in power who abuse it." That's a complete overhaul of our legal protocols, Vance protested. Yes, Vivian said. It is, because our current protocols are designed to protect the company's reputation at the expense of our employees' safety. That ends now. The debate lasted 90 minutes, but when the vote came, it was 8-4 in favor of Caleb's recommendations. Robert Brennan was terminated effective immediately. Jessica Chen received a formal apology and compensation package, and the policy reforms would be implemented company-wide within 60 days. Jessica Chen walked out of that boardroom with her head high for the first time in 2 years. Caleb watched her shake Vivian's hand, watched something like hope flicker across her face, and felt the enormity of what they'd just accomplished settle into his bones. One case, one woman vindicated. It was a drop in an ocean of injustice, but it was a start. In the hallway afterward, Helena pulled him aside. Her expression was impossible to read. "You won today," she said quietly. "But understand something, Mr. Mercer. The 4 board members who voted against you, they represent 53% of our institutional investors. They're going to push back hard on every reform you propose. They're going to question every expense. They're going to make your life very difficult." "They already are," Caleb said. "It's going to get worse." She paused. "But for what it's worth, I think you're doing important work. Just be prepared for how ugly this could get." She was right about the ugliness. Within a week, someone leaked Jessica's testimony to the press. Not the triumphant vindication angle, but carefully edited excerpts designed to make her look vindictive and unstable. The article ran in a business journal known for conservative reporting, with the headline, "Former Employees' Accusations Raise Questions About Ashford Industries' Stability." Caleb's team traced the leak back to Richard Vance's office. When confronted, Vance claimed it was an accidental disclosure, that one of his paralegals had mishandled confidential documents. "That's bullshit, and everyone knows it," Marcus said during their emergency meeting. "He leaked it deliberately to undermine Jessica's credibility." "Can we prove it?" Caleb asked. Priya pulled up email metadata. The leak happened from Vance's personal email account, but he'll claim his account was compromised or that someone used his computer without authorization. Without him admitting it, we're stuck. Caleb looked at Vivian, who joined them via video conference. "What do you want to do?" "I want to fire him," Vivian said bluntly. "But he's too connected to too many board members. If I terminate him without ironclad proof, it becomes a he said, she said situation that will paralyze the company for months." She rubbed her temples, exhaustion evident. "We need to be strategic." "Strategic means letting him get away with it," James said quietly. "No, strategic means building a case so comprehensive that when we move against him, he can't wiggle out." Vivian's eyes hardened. "Caleb, I want you to audit every case his department handled in the last 5 years. Every settlement, every NDA, every complaint that disappeared. If there's a pattern of misconduct, we document it all. Then we present it to the board as a systematic failure requiring immediate action." "That's going to take months," Priya said. "Then we work fast." Caleb was already pulling up files. "And we do it right, because he's not the only one we need to hold accountable. He's just the most visible symptom of a system that's been broken for years." The audit consumed the next 2 months. Caleb's team worked 12-hour days, reviewing hundreds of cases, interviewing former employees who'd been silenced by NDAs, documenting patterns of legal maneuvering designed to protect the company at all costs. What they found was worse than anyone had anticipated. In 5 years, Ashford Industries' legal department had settled 83 complaints involving harassment, discrimination, safety violations, and wage theft. Total settlement cost, $4.2 million. Total number of managers or executives terminated as a result, 0. The pattern was clear and damning. Legal wasn't protecting the company from frivolous lawsuits. They were operating a systematic cover-up machine, using money and legal threats to silence anyone who challenged the status quo. Caleb presented the findings to Vivian in early December, 6 months after he'd walked into that boardroom to save her life. She read through the documentation in silence, her face growing paler with each page. When she finished, she set the folder down carefully, as if it might explode. 83 cases, she said quietly. 83 people we failed. And I had no idea. The system was designed so you wouldn't, Caleb said. That's the point. Settlements happen quietly. NDAs keep people silent. By the time anything reaches your level, it's already been sanitized and packaged as protecting the company's interests. Who else knows about this? Just my team right now, but we need to take it to the board, and we need to be prepared for the fallout. Vivian stood and walked to her office window, looking out over Philadelphia. If we release this, it's going to destroy careers, tank our stock price, trigger lawsuits from every person who settled. The media will crucify us. Probably, Caleb agreed. But if we don't release it, we're complicit in the cover-up. We become exactly what Gordon Price accused me of being, someone who cares more about image than integrity. Yes. Vivian turned to face him. You know what's going to happen if we do this? Half the board will call for my resignation. Investors will panic. Competitors will use it against us. I might lose everything I built. I know. Caleb stood up, meeting her eyes. But you'll keep your integrity, and you'll give 83 people the acknowledgement they deserved years ago. That has to count for something. She smiled faintly. When did you become the voice of my conscience? About the time you decided to trust a janitor with CPR training. Best decision I ever made. Vivian pulled out her phone. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for next week. We're going to present everything and let them decide who they want to be. A company that hides from the truth or one that faces it head on. The emergency board meeting happened on a cold Tuesday morning in mid-December. Caleb stood in front of 12 people who now looked at him with varying degrees of respect, resentment, and calculation. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Over the past 2 months, my team has audited every legal settlement involving employee complaints from the last 5 years. What we found represents a systematic failure of corporate governance and basic human decency. He presented the numbers. 83 settlements, $4.2 million, zero accountability for perpetrators. The patterns were undeniable. Complaints clustered around specific managers, departments where turnover was suspiciously high, safety violations that were settled instead of corrected. Richard Vance tried to interrupt 3 times. Each time, Vivian shut him down with a look that could freeze blood. When Caleb finished, the silence was absolute. David, the younger board member who'd supported Jessica Chen, spoke first. This is catastrophic. If this becomes public, it's going to become public, Vivian said firmly. The question isn't whether we release this information. It's how we release it and what we do about it. You're suggesting we voluntarily destroy our own reputation? Helena's voice was icy. I'm suggesting we get ahead of this before someone else exposes it and we look even worse. Vivian pulled out her own presentation. Here's what I'm proposing. We release a comprehensive statement acknowledging systematic failures in our complaint handling. We commit to contacting every person who settled and offering them the opportunity to have their cases reviewed independently. We terminate Richard Vance and anyone else who participated in the cover-up. And we implement the policy reforms Caleb's team developed. Mandatory independent investigations, elimination of NDAs, whistleblower protections, and regular third-party audits. That's corporate suicide, one of the board members said flatly. No, Caleb countered. Corporate suicide is pretending this doesn't exist until someone leaks it and we have no credibility left to salvage. At least this way we control the narrative. We admit fault. We commit to change. We become an example of what corporate accountability actually looks like. That's idealistic nonsense, another board member scoffed. The market will destroy us. The market might surprise you, Vivian said. Consumers are demanding ethical behavior from companies. Employees are demanding safe workplaces. Investors are starting to recognize that ESG compliance isn't just good PR, it's good business. We have a chance to lead on this issue instead of being dragged into it kicking and screaming. The debate raged for 3 hours. Board members argued about liability exposure, stock price impacts, competitive disadvantages, and reputation damage. Some threatened to resign. Others threatened lawsuits. Finally, Helena called for a vote. The motion to release the audit findings and implement comprehensive reforms passed 7-5. Richard Vance was terminated immediately, escorted from the building by security while he screamed about wrongful termination and lawsuits. 2 other senior attorneys who'd participated in the settlement scheme resigned rather than face investigation. Caleb watched Vance being led away and felt a grim satisfaction. One more person who'd weaponized the system finally facing consequences. But the real work was just beginning. The public statement went out that afternoon. Vivian delivered it personally in a press conference that was broadcast live across multiple networks. Today, Ashford Industries is acknowledging a truth we should have faced years ago, she began, her voice steady, despite the cameras and reporters. Our legal department operated a systematic program to silence employee complaints rather than address them. We used settlements and non-disclosure agreements to protect our reputation at the expense of our employees' dignity and safety. This was wrong. It was unethical. And it stops now. She outlined the reforms, the commitment to contact every affected employee, the independent review process. She took full responsibility as CEO and announced she was taking a voluntary 25% pay cut until the reforms were fully implemented. I know this revelation will damage our company's reputation in the short term, Vivian said, but I would rather lead a company known for confronting its failures than one that hides them. We're committed to doing better, not because it's profitable, but because it's right. The press conference lasted 90 minutes. Reporters asked hard questions. Vivian answered everyone honestly, even when the answers made the company look worse. When it was over, she walked off the stage to find Caleb waiting in the wings. That was brutal, she said quietly. That was brave. Our stock dropped 12% in the last hour. It'll recover. Caleb handed her a bottle of water. You did the right thing. I hope you're right. She took a long drink, her hands shaking slightly. Because if I'm wrong, I just destroyed everything I built. The next 72 hours were chaos. The stock continued to drop, bottoming out at 18% below pre-announcement levels. 3 institutional investors issued statements expressing concern. Competitors gleefully highlighted Ashford Industries' failures in their own marketing. The hashtag #AshfordAbuse trended on social media. But something else happened too. Former employees started coming forward, not to sue, but to share their stories. People who'd been silenced by NDAs contacted Caleb's team to participate in the independent review. Workers at other companies began demanding similar accountability from their own employers. And buried in the avalanche of media coverage was a surprising trend: consumer support. A grassroots campaign started on social media. Stand with Ashford. People praised Vivian's transparency. Employees at other companies began organizing to demand similar reforms. Business ethics professors assigned the case study to their students. Within a week, 3 major corporate clients actually expanded their contracts with Ashford Industries, citing the company's commitment to accountability as a deciding factor. The stock started to recover. Caleb watched it all from his office, coordinating the independent review process, while simultaneously building out the employee welfare initiative into something sustainable. His team had grown to 12 people. The budget had tripled, and they were processing complaints and implementing reforms at a pace that left everyone exhausted but energized. On a Friday evening, 3 weeks after the announcement, Vivian appeared at his office door. "Go home," she said. "You've been here 14 hours. So have you. I own the company. You have a daughter who probably wants to see her father." She sat down across from him. "How's the review going?" "Overwhelming. We've heard from 62 of the 83 people who settled. Most want their cases reviewed. Some just want acknowledgement. A few want nothing to do with us, which is fair." Caleb rubbed his eyes. "But we're making progress. The new complaint system is live. We've already received 18 reports in the first week." 18? Vivian looked alarmed. "Which means people finally trust the system enough to use it." Caleb pulled up the data. Before, complaints were being suppressed or dismissed. Now they're being investigated properly. It's not that there's more harassment, it's that we're actually seeing what was always there. That's both encouraging and horrifying. Yeah, Caleb closed his laptop. But it's real, and we're dealing with it. That's more than we were doing before. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been asked to speak at a conference next month. Corporate Ethics and Leadership Summit. They want me to present on what we've done here. The audit, the reforms, the transparency initiative." "That's great. I want you to come with me. Present your side of it. How you built the employee welfare program. What you've learned, why it matters." She leaned forward. "Caleb, what we're doing here. It could be a model for other companies, but only if we share it, only if we prove it works. I'm not a public speaker. You gave a presentation to our board that changed company policy. You wrote a LinkedIn post that went viral. You're better at this than you think. She smiled. Plus, the world needs to see that this isn't just some CEO's pet project. It's a fundamental reimagining of how corporations treat employees. And that message is more powerful coming from you than from me. Caleb thought about it. Thought about all the people still trapped in jobs that treated them as disposable. Thought about every worker who needed to hear that someone was fighting for them. Okay, he said. I'll do it. The conference was in New York in late January. Caleb stood backstage in a suit that actually fit properly this time, watching Vivian deliver the opening remarks to an audience of 500 corporate leaders, HR professionals, and business ethics experts. She told the story honestly, the cardiac arrest, the cover-up, the systematic failures that came to light. She didn't minimize or excuse. She laid it all out with the kind of brutal transparency that made some people in the audience shift uncomfortably. Then she introduced Caleb. He walked on stage to polite applause, his heart hammering, and faced an audience that could change how thousands of companies treated millions of workers. 6 months ago, I was a janitor working 2 jobs to support my daughter, he began. I had no corporate experience, no business degree, no connections or credentials that would qualify me to be standing here today. What I had was first-hand knowledge of what it's like to be invisible, to be treated as disposable, to watch the system protect the powerful and crush everyone else. He told his story, the CPR, the beating, the firing, the public destruction. He didn't dramatize or embellish. He just told the truth. When Vivian Ashford offered me a position building an employee welfare program, I thought she was crazy. I thought there was no way someone like me could make a difference in a system that big and that broken. He paused. But here's what I learned. The system isn't some abstract force. It's made up of decisions, individual choices by people in power about who matters and who doesn't, and those choices can change. He presented the data, the 83 cases, the reforms implemented, the early results showing increased reporting and faster resolution of legitimate complaints. He talked about the challenges, the resistance, the ongoing struggle to shift entrenched culture. Change is expensive and uncomfortable, Caleb said. It costs money. It disrupts operations. It forces people to confront uncomfortable truths about how they've been complicit in harmful systems. But the cost of not changing is higher. It's measured in human suffering, in talent wasted, in lives destroyed because someone decided profit mattered more than people. He looked out at the audience, hundreds of people with the power to implement similar changes in their own organizations. I'm not going to stand here and tell you this is easy. It's not. We face resistance every day. We make mistakes. We're still learning, but we're doing it. And if we can do it, if a pharmaceutical company with a history of systematic abuse can transform into something better, then anyone can. He took a breath. The question isn't whether change is possible. It's whether you're willing to do the hard work to make it happen. The applause started before he finished speaking and grew into a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, Caleb was mobbed by conference attendees wanting to know more. HR directors asking for implementation guides, corporate ethics officers requesting consultation, employees from other companies sharing their own stories of being failed by broken systems. A woman in her 50s with tears in her eyes grabbed his hand. My son was fired for reporting safety violations at his company. They destroyed his reputation just like they tried to destroy yours. Thank you for proving that sometimes the good guys can win. Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he just squeezed her hand and said, I'm sorry about your son, and I hope things get better for him. That night, Vivian took him to dinner at a restaurant where the menu didn't list prices, the kind of place he'd never imagined being able to afford. You were brilliant today, she said, raising her wine glass. Half the people there want to hire you away from me. I'm not going anywhere. Caleb took a sip of water. We're not done yet. No, we're not, Vivian smiled. But we're making progress. The Employee Welfare Initiative is being written up in business journals. 3 companies have already implemented similar programs based on our model, and our employee satisfaction scores have gone up 23% since we started the reforms. That's good. It's remarkable. She set down her glass. Caleb, I've been thinking about next steps, about how we scale this. I want to create a foundation, independent from Ashford Industries, focused on corporate accountability and worker protection. I want you to run it. Caleb stared at her. Run a foundation? Build programs, consult with companies, advocate for policy changes. Everything we're doing at Ashford, but on a national scale. Her eyes were bright with possibility. We could change entire industries, set new standards for how companies treat employees, give workers the tools to fight back against exploitation. Caleb couldn't find words. That's huge. So was doing CPR while getting beaten. You didn't hesitate then. Don't hesitate now. I need to think about it. Talk to Lily. Make sure this is right for us. Of course. Vivian signaled for the check. But Caleb, whatever you decide, know that you've already changed more lives than you realize. You saved mine. You vindicated Jessica Chen and 61 others. You've built a model that's influencing companies across the country. That's not small. That's legacy. The drive back to Philadelphia gave Caleb time to think about how far he'd come in 6 months, about the life he was building for Lily, stable housing, good schools, a future that didn't involve constant panic about money, about the people his work was helping. But he thought most about Gordon Price's words during that first confrontation. You have no idea how things work in the real world. Gordon was wrong. Caleb knew exactly how things worked, and he'd spent 6 months proving they could work differently. When he got home, Mrs. Hattie was asleep on his couch, a blanket pulled over her. Lily was in her room, also asleep, surrounded by books from the library program the new school offered. Caleb stood in the doorway watching his daughter breathe, thinking about the bathroom floor where he'd collapsed 6 months ago, thinking about how close he'd come to dying invisible and forgotten. He wasn't invisible anymore. The next morning, Gordon Price's final attack came in the form of a lawsuit. Caleb opened his email to find legal papers accusing him of defamation, harassment, and tortious interference with Gordon's career prospects. The suit demanded $5 million in damages and was filed in federal court with maximum publicity. Every news outlet picked it up immediately. The narrative shifted overnight. Suddenly, Caleb wasn't a hero. He was an opportunist being sued by a respected former CFO for destroying his reputation with false accusations. Caleb sat in his office reading the complaint and felt old rage resurface. Gordon was trying to do to him exactly what Ashford Industries had done to Jessica Chen and 82 others, use legal threats to silence someone who'd exposed uncomfortable truths. But this time was different. This time, Caleb had resources, had Vivian's full support, had documentation of every statement he'd made, had video evidence, witness testimony, and a paper trail that proved everything he'd said about Gordon was true. Vivian's legal team, the new one, not Vance's corrupt department, filed a motion to dismiss within 48 hours. They attached the security footage showing Caleb being beaten while saving Vivian's life, the internal memos showing Gordon orchestrating the cover-up, the payment records proving he'd paid a reporter to run a false story. The motion was devastatingly thorough. Gordon's lawyers tried to fight it, tried to claim the evidence was taken out of context, tried to argue that Gordon had acted in good faith to protect the company. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice 3 weeks later, calling it a transparent attempt to weaponize the legal system against someone who exposed legitimate corporate misconduct. Gordon tried to appeal. The appellate court refused to hear it. 2 months after filing his lawsuit, Gordon Price was effectively unhireable in the pharmaceutical industry, facing his own legal problems from former employees he'd helped silence and watching his reputation crumble the way he'd tried to destroy Caleb's. Caleb didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction in watching someone else fall apart, even someone who'd tried to destroy him. But he did feel vindicated and safe. For the first time in his adult life, he felt safe. Spring came to Philadelphia with cherry blossoms and warm rain. Caleb stood on the balcony of his apartment, the one with 3 bedrooms and no roaches, watching Lily play in the courtyard below with other kids from the building. His phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. Board approved the foundation. We launch in June. Still want to run it? Caleb thought about the woman at the conference whose son had been destroyed for reporting safety violations. Thought about Jessica Chen and the 61 others who'd finally gotten acknowledgement. Thought about every worker still trapped in systems designed to exploit them. He typed back, "Yes, let's build something that lasts." That evening, Lily asked him to help with her homework, a school project about heroes. She'd chosen to write about him. "You saved that lady's life," Lily read from her notes. "And then you saved lots of other people by making companies be nice to workers. That's two kinds of hero." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "Baby girl, I'm not a hero. I just did what needed to be done." "That's what heroes do, Dad." She looked at him with 8-year-old certainty. They do hard things because they're right. Later, after Lily was asleep, Caleb stood on the balcony again, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, people were working jobs that didn't value them. Fighting systems designed to keep them invisible, struggling to survive while being told they were disposable. He couldn't save everyone, couldn't fix every broken system, couldn't undo decades of exploitation and abuse. But he could fight, could build programs that protected workers, could hold powerful people accountable, could prove that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, speaking truth to power actually worked. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Mrs. Hattie. "Proud of you, child. Always knew you were meant for something big." Caleb smiled and typed back, "Couldn't have made it without you. Thank you for everything." He thought about where he'd been 6 months ago, collapsed on a bathroom floor, dying slowly from injuries sustained while saving a stranger's life. Invisible, destroyed, hopeless. Now he was standing on a balcony in a safe apartment, his daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, planning a foundation that would help thousands of workers across the country. He had a job that mattered, resources to fight back, a voice that people listened to. He was seen, not as a problem to be solved or a body to be exploited, but as a person who mattered, who could make a difference, who refused to let anyone else die invisible. Lily's question from months ago echoed in his mind. "Are you happy, Dad?" For the first time in years, Caleb could answer honestly, "Yes, baby girl. I'm happy. Because I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living, and I'm making sure others get that chance too." The city lights sparkled below him, each one representing a person with their own struggles, their own dreams, their own fight for dignity. Caleb couldn't save them all, but he could try, and that was enough. The man who'd once been invisible had become impossible to ignore, and he was just getting started.